Can pigeons read? This one gives every indication, because he's been taught to distinguish between two words and to behave appropriately. He's learned his different response to each sign by being rewarded with food. So the bird isn't acting independently. Its behavior is shaped by controlling its environment. The first task was to isolate an individual piece of behavior and see how that could be changed. Skinner did this by keeping individual pigeons at about 3/4 of their normal weight, so that the birds were always hungry, and food could be used as an automatic reward. The pigeon was studied in a uniform box, one it quickly grew used to. One piece of behavior, pecking a coloured disc, was measured on a graph. The pigeon learned that pecking the disc produced a reward. Then the behavior of pecking could be studied in relation to how often that reward was offered, or in Skinner's terms, what was the schedule of reinforcement.
The main thing is what we call schedules of reinforcement. Reinforcement is what the layman calls reward, and you can schedule it so that a reward occurs every now and then when a pigeon does something. We usually use a response with a pigeon pecking a little disc, a little spot in the wall, and you can reinforce with food, but you don't reinforce every time. Perhaps every 10th time, or perhaps only once every minute or something like that. There are a very large number of schedules, and they have their special effects. And there is a good example of how you can move from the pigeon to the human case, because one of the schedules which is very effective with rats or pigeons is what we call the variable ratio schedule, and that is at the heart of all gambling devices, and has the same effect. The pigeon can become a pathological gambler just as a person can. Now, the fact that we found that out with pigeons and could prove it by removing and changing the schedule makes it easy for us to interpret the case with the human subject. We don't say that the human subject gambles to punish himself, as the Freudians might say, or gambles because he feels excited when he does so. Nothing of the sort. People gamble because of the schedule of the reinforcement that follows, and this is true of all gambling systems. They all have variable ratios built into them. So what we've learned from the pigeon, it made it possible to interpret this vast field very effectively.
Where does that leave free will? Because we all think we have a choice whether to do things or not to do things.
Yes. Well, you see, it leaves it in the position of a fiction. We have assumed somehow or other that these internal states, feelings, and so on have initiated something. They have started something. They have created. We have done something in a voluntary way. We have willed to act. If you now look at the actual history, we find that there are external reasons why this has happened. In other words, by discovering the causes of behavior, we can dispose of the imagined internal cause. We dispose of free will as an American divine of the 18th century, Jonathan Edwards, did. He said, we believe in free will because we know about our behavior, but not about its causes. And of course, it's the object of a science of behavior to discover causes. And once you have found those causes, there is less you need to attribute to an internal act or will, and eventually, I think, we need to attribute nothing to it.
The hungry animal remains active, but as the satiated one becomes adapted to the new environment, he settles down and becomes inactive. The hungry rat is active. He stands up near the bar, but just misses it. The correct response of pressing the bar cannot be rewarded and learned until it occurs. Stands up near the bar, presses it, but since he does not see the pellet and the food cup, he is not rewarded. Now he finds the pellet and is rewarded for approaching the food cup. From now on, he confines more of his activity to the region of the food dish.
Okay, so there you have it. That's training a rat to press a bar. So what does this have to do with larger issues? Well, if you have trained an animal to give you a dog to give you its paw, or a parakeet to speak, then you have used Skinner's techniques. But of course, we can get animals to do more complex behaviors through a method called the method of successive approximations. So let's just take a look at some modern video. This is some video taken from YouTube, used by permission by the author. And what you'll see here is the same kinds of principles being used to train a parakeet. Okay, so you see the bird spinning the toy carousel there and gets rewarded. All right. Spins it again, gets rewarded. So we could get this bird to spin this carousel quite a number of times as long as we withhold the reward for quite a while. All right, so now let's see how this method of successive approximations can result in a bird who can not only play golf, but he can play basketball, and he can play them both better than me.
Can you shake hands? Shake hands. Good bird. Put the ball in. Good job, AJ. Pick up the ball. Thank you. Put the ball in. Put the ball in. Put the ball in. Good shot. Basket. Put it in the basket. Put it in the basket. Put it in the basket. Put the ball in the basket. Good bird.
Those people who weren't so crazy about Skinner's philosophy that our behavior is all the result of reinforcement challenged him by saying, how about something like superstitions? How do you explain that? Isn't that uniquely human? Well, Skinner set up an experiment to show that it was not and that it could be learned. So he put pigeons in a Skinner box, and instead of rewarding them for a behavior like pressing a bar, he just rewarded them. After 15 seconds or so, they just got a reward. And what he found out was these birds adopted unusual behaviors. Some of them were twirling around in circles. Others were pecking in the corner. Why? Because that's what they were doing at the time the reward came to them. Okay, now I promised to relate this to your bowling style, and we're ready. Now, I'm not really interested in your style, that is, how you run down the alley and deliver the ball. What I'm mostly interested in is what you do after you throw the ball. Now watch here. This is a video also from YouTube, used by permission. And here's a young lady bowling. Now watch what she does after she releases the ball. She's got this leaning going on, right? There's a little leaning to the left in this case, right? She's trying to get that ball. All right, and now she'll try again. And here you see again, she's got that lean going. She's leaning to the left there, trying to influence the ball. Actually, what's happened is the ball has influenced her. The ball is released, and at one point in your experience, a movement of your body coincided with the ball knocking down some pins. The ball has conditioned you. That is why many of us, after releasing the ball in bowling, have adopted a variety of behaviors. Now, one last thing to observe in this video. Watch the younger boy to the right of your screen. He really has got the lean going. Okay, one final example of superstitious behavior, which would be explained by this very same process. Now, here are my children in the mall, demonstrating for me, acting out. I swear they do this in reality, but I did ask them to act this out. This is that behavior that maybe you also have, which is where you go up to the elevator and you press the button again and again, under the belief that one of those presses is going to really be the one to get the elevator door to open. And luckily, one of the times that my daughter pushes the button, the door opens. So you know what? I guess I have conditioned her for life to press elevator buttons.